Hey, it's Mopar Keith, and welcome back to my channel. So the shop I run is Noel Automotive here in West Branch, Iowa, and we do some restoration and we also do preservation. And what I mean by preservation is that we can take an original car and preserve what is already there. It doesn't need restoration, it doesn't need repainted or sandblasted or totally taken apart. We try to preserve what is already there and return it to its original state. So we have a 1970 Challenger RT in the shop, and we're going to go through different parts of the car and show you what's original and what we have done to keep it in original form or condition. So let's go out in the shop and see what we got going on. We are in for a treat. We've been working on this 1970 Challenger RT, and this is pretty special because it's a rare color you just don't see very often. It's also all original paint. This car is very low mileage. Let's take a look and see just how low it is. It's actually not as low as I thought. It's really been well taken care of. 54,000 miles on this thing. This car is in amazing condition and it's been sitting for years with very little use. So the car was used, I guess, primarily when it was in its infancy, but in the last 30 years it's basically just sat. Let's see if we can point out a few things here. All right, wherever it sat, like in a garage most likely, the sun must have been shining through a window to come down to this door and bake this door panel out. The other door panel is really, really nice. Let's take a look. See, that thing is like mint. There's no scratches, no fading. It's just really nice. So whatever the reason, the sun must have been shining in on that door panel. This is all original carpet. It's in very nice condition, very clean. Obviously kept inside because the dash has zero cracks. They always crack right there. If you're a E-body fan, you know this. Air-conditioned car, original decals. Look at the way that thing shuts. So before we pull this car outside, let's do an in-depth look under the hood and up in the air on the hoist. All right, more documentation on the car today. And let me grab a light here and we'll go through the front end of this car. All right, we'll start here at the front. So we've got two coins. We've got the top one is number 77. So that number should be represented on the build sheet. On this connecting bar here, this brace, we've got a white inspection mark. Let's go over here. So the connecting rod here between the steering link, we've got an orange inspection mark that carries over to the two nuts. So that's all original. And we've got just a little, let's see, where is it? Here we go. Just a little remnant of it over here. So a little bit of orange on that. Here's the oil pan engine paint. So the pans never got painted on the bottom. And there's just, it's really faint, but there's an X on the bottom of that pan. So we've got the runs and no paint on the bottom. One thing to note is the coolant thing is not painted. All right, so like I was saying, the coolant plug is not painted with the block, so that's always bare. Let's see, got the new spark plugs and wires in it today. And lots of cleaning. This car is super, super oily. Skid plate, got new fuel pump and the vapor separator, and I've got the correct style squeeze clamps on there. Let's see, cleaned up that so you can see that nice galvanizing. I guess they call that large flake galvanizing. There was an transmission line where it goes in. Not a yellow mount, some of them are yellow. That thing's about smoked, probably from all the oil leaks. And let's go back here on the differential. We cleaned it up, new seals. So we've got a white one on the pinion. We've got a stencil marking there, orange there. We've got a blue dot on there and a white dot. And over here we've got two markings, yellow and orange. Let's see, and then the ever popular one on the back, I can't tell what that is. It might be a D. And the paper tag is long gone. Anyway, that's you could continue to clean on this car forever, but that kind of does it for our initial inspection marks. Oh, I know another one. So here's one right here on the top of that adjuster cam. And we've got the torsion bar ones I cleaned off. There's two for the left. They're kind of a brown color. One on the right side. So you got one on the right side. And then the other adjuster cam, it's got some orange on it too. Although there are many other parts of the car that are very important during a restoration, the engine bay always seems to be the heart of where things happen, and probably the most interesting part for most enthusiasts. So we're just going to go around and just kind of take a closer look at some of the things that have been monkeyed with and some of the things that are original. So I guess we'll just start with this power line right here. So obviously sometime in the car's history this solenoid wire has been damaged and it's been butt connected, so that yellow butt connector right there is not factory. So one thing that's unique about this car, well, we'll get into a lot of unique things, but here is the fender tag with its original clamp, and it still has part of the inspection tag, the aluminum tag that's right there, that's still original. Some of the clamps. Got cruise control, some of the fasteners. Now one thing I did see brought up in another forum at one time is how the cruise control cable bracket only had one nut. So right there, here's another example of how that bracket is only attached with one nut. So I don't know if this is a common thing or the way they did it. Obviously it looks like it could use another nut on there for stability, but it really just guides this cable. It doesn't really hold anything of substantial weight. Most likely the original master cylinder. This is a powered drum brake car. So this is the original diochromate or gold cad lid there with the phosphate clamp. Here's an inspection mark. Now this is a early build 1970 RT. And you can see that the blackout was crudely painted. We did a video on another RTSE V code, and it had even worse runs than this one. But this blackout right here was actually discontinued mid-year, so sometime in April and May is when this was discontinued. So there's the blackout. And it was sprayed with the whole car assembled. It was one of the last things sprayed before the car was put together. So you can see overspray down there. It's pretty clear how the spray technique was on top and it just drifted downward. And this kind of coincides with the same exact paint used for the core support. Red clip, and then the red anodizing Corbin clip for the vacuum booster. Note the routing underneath the throttle cable bracket, and another clamp. There's your AC vacuum for the vacuum controlled switches. Now one thing I'm not positive on, it really looks original, but I could be wrong, is that screw holding the ballast resistor right there, and it's also the same screws holding down the ECU box. That's typically what you see right there is what's holding the voltage regulator. Get a close-up of that.
sloppy seam sealer. There's the bracket, or I'm sorry, I guess you can call it a clamp for the neutral safety switch wire on the bell housing. Now, we did do spark plugs and plug wires on this as a maintenance procedure, and we did valve cover gaskets also. We reused or used a cork style gasket with seams or a gasket maker on there. So when we took the original gaskets off, it did have that same kind of tab sticking out. Now, when I've taken this apart, I did remove this AC bracket back here to gain access to the plug wires. You see there's a paper tag for the ground cable. Vacuum or a PCV vacuum hose. There's some of that orange exhaust manifold paint and the valve cover stud. Eccentric nuts out. Sometimes I see on restorations where that bolt is actually turned around backwards, but the nut is to be exposed to the outside. Just trying to show as much detail as I can. Here's another thing that I notice sometimes is people will put this cowl seal on backwards. It's right here. It's open to the engine bay. And another thing I see commonly missed, like more missed than not, is this piece of cloth tape or friction tape that's over this hole right here. So there's supposed to be a tape that covers that hole, and then the seal is on top of it, and it's on both sides. And this goes for 71 and up B bodies, and all E bodies have that same cowl hole that's covered by cloth tape. Now, in this 1970, there are Phillips head screws holding down the plastic vent covers. So in later models, there would be clips, and there was also hex head bolts. While we're up into this cowl area, here's another thing that I see just totally messed up all the time, is the bolt plating. You should have a black phosphate bolt there and a chrome bolt here. This is always chrome, and along with the other one, let's get a close-up look at that. It's supposed to be a chrome bolt. I see so many people, they paint them, they get the plating wrong, but that's how it's supposed to be. And then on cheap paint jobs, you always see this insulation painted because people are too lazy to pull out the wiper control or the wiper mechanism. They just paint right over that gasket. There's paint over it, and it's such an easy thing to do when you're painting a car. Why not just spend the extra time and pull that wiper mechanism out instead of spraying paint on it? So correct bolts. Let's see, and then the screw right here. Here's another thing that people can't always seem to get. Let's see if I can get a close-up of it. This little tiny clip down there. The camera won't even focus. Little tiny clip that holds that rod on there. That's to keep the wiper arm straight. As we wrap our way around the engine bay here, we'll come over here to the core support blackout. And once again, we did another RTSE 1970 and it had almost the same exact core blackout, just completely sloppy. You see how they didn't even get it over here, and they got maybe way too much over here. The other RT that we documented, this whole entire thing was all blacked out. But core support blackout, so you don't see color behind the grill. So it appears this hood release spring is bare metal because it's got a kind of a rusty sheen to it. Then here's your hood latch. Get a good close-up of that. It's got kind of a blackish gray with some people say there's a tint of green to it. Plating on that, which also matches the secondary latch. So I have cleaned this, so it's about as clean as it's going to get. So that's your secondary latch that's plated, and then your striker right here, which is painted with the hood. Here's your painted clips for the core support to hood seal, and these clips are painted. Here's a clip for your hood insulation. Now they do reproduce these clips, however the spring steel that they use is very brittle, so whenever I can, if I have to replace the hood insulation, I'll try to source some original clips. And those very well could have been bare metal, just because they're pretty rusty right now. One core support blackout, and you can see how the condenser had black on it, but then the pipe, I'd call that the high pressure side. The high pressure side pipe looks to be kind of maybe a silver zinc plating. There's a cushion clamp. There's original hood bumpers. Here's one thing that's missed a lot. A flat washer belongs here. So right here, that's supposed to be a flat washer. Sometimes you see a star washer, but on all E-bodies hood pins that I've ever seen, it's a flat washer. Here's the original lanyard. Now I don't know if this alternator is original. I have not checked the date code on it. One thing that is suspicious to me is it doesn't have any kind of markings on it. Usually I've been seeing like a giant orange inspection mark on it, and I have not seen that on this car. Belt deflection bracket. And most likely because it's an AC car, we have a lot going on here with the wires here. We got cloth tape holding some stuff down to the fuel line. Original carburetor. Don't believe it's ever been off the car.
All right, so we've been using the Galen Govier white books, and these things are invaluable for part numbers, date codes, and all kinds of stuff. And on this Dodge Challenger, we have looked at some of the part numbers on the car, and we've got a carburetor number of 4741S. And 4741S is correct and the original carburetor for this 1970 Challenger 440RT automatic car.
Alright, continuing with the engine bay look here. So you can see I've cleaned this pretty good, and you can see that the core support blackout they just hose it like crazy. So it's all over the place inside here. And then there's that cam adjuster bolt or nut that's poking through, and there's a little white inspection mark there. There's the part numbers on the receiver dryer and the high pressure cutoff switch part number and stenciling. Some more exhaust manifold paint that still exists. Here's your coil. And the stenciling on the coil. Let's see if I can get a picture of this. So it actually, on the Prestolite distributor cap, it does read Made in USA. So that's absolutely the original one. There's a better close-up of that coil. Also made in USA. Alright, here's a little interesting tidbit. I pulled the battery tray out, and this is the dip primer. This is the gray primer underneath the battery tray, and this is obviously upside down, but you can see the drips right here, right here, right here, there and there. So these are the drips underneath the car as it drips dry, and there's some undercoating that would blow through one of the inspection holes. Let's go take a look over here. So before the car is assembled, this hole right there, this is the alignment inspection cover, and the undercoating obviously blew right through there. All original except for the wires right there. So we did the wires today. And the reason I pulled the battery tray off is a good way to clean, and I could actually get to that bracket. Now here's a really good example of the exhaust manifold paint that still exists. So this car has 52,000 miles on it, and the paint was so thick there it still has not burned off. So there's a factory style stud. Big blocks always have the stud in the corners. So anyway, all original. The belts have been replaced, but you can tell that the hoses are original there. So yeah. Move this light a little bit here. Let's go back to the firewall. Get back to that voltage regulator bolt. There's your cowl blackout. Just kind of super sporadic everywhere. And there's that piece of tape I was talking about. Like a white zinc or silver cad. I'd call it white zinc, I guess. So white heater blower motor. Yellow diode chromate on the heater control valve. Now this hose here looks to be plated kind of a yellow, and then over here that same one is painted black. Do a couple more close-ups of the fasteners here. That looks to be the same fastener that holds the accumulator on. Hood hinge with the large washer. And the fender bolts. So you can see there's some inconsistencies, but basically they would just get bolts from whatever vendor. Alright, well, that's pretty much the ins and outs of this engine bay. Like I said, I did put a new fuel pump on it and replace the hoses with the correct style keystone clamps. The original belts are long gone. These are some decent Gates belts on there right now. I would like to see a reproduction restoration belt on that, but it's not up to me. The owner might choose to do that later. Obviously a modern battery just because. Alright, so I think that kind of takes care of the engine bay for right now. Now you can see on this trunk lid, it is not a TA trunk lid because it doesn't have the holes here for the rear spoiler, but it was designed to have a go wing or gull wing. So these bracket holes right here, and then also it could have had a luggage rack. So these holes right here were designed for the luggage rack. And then for the gull wings, you would have this giant corner bracket that would fit in here with spring nuts. Your die-lot stamps. And the trunk jack instructions. And the light. And you can see where the wire comes out. It's a special clip right there. Alright. Real nice original looking collapsible spare. The inflator bottle. Just really nice. Here's something 1970 and early 71s have this plug right here, and the later model trunk floors like 71 later and 234 Challengers and Cudas have the plug right here. This is for the shock bolt access. Kind of a white zinc here. Let's talk about this undercoating here a little bit. Now, after years and years of trying to figure out how they did it, I figured out, I always wondered how they got the undercoating on the quarter panels clear up in there. And I figured out after taking a few cars apart that the undercoating was applied to this quarter panel before it even went on the car. So the technician would spray close, but not all the way to the weld areas and the areas that needed to be sealed off, like the fill neck and the turn signal or the side marker light. So they actually either sprayed really careful or they had some kind of template to block that off. And this undercoating is, every restoration guy tries to replicate this, but they don't always get it. And there's always different versions of it. Sometimes it's applied super clean, super thick, thin, but it's, keep in mind, it's just a human working on a line, just spraying it as he goes. This trunk floor is super sanitary. You can see the original style seam sealer applied with a air gun, like a caulking gun, and then smeared out with either their hand or they had a big brush or something. There's some seam sealer there. Quarter panel trim, speed nuts or pal nuts. Now in 1970 Plymouth, they painted the side marker light with the car, and so sometimes this bezel or this bracketry on the back got some overspray on it. But on the Dodge, they had chrome side marker lights, so these weren't even close to the car when it was being painted. It's the original spot welds. Now here's something. Every car is programmed with the right side tailpipe hanger, and dual exhaust cars got the left side hanger. Now Trans Am cars, meaning Challenger TA and Cuda AARs, this was eliminated due to the side exhaust. So they just put some strip caulking on top of those holes there. And let's go over here, and we do have a little bit of rust. I think we're gonna put some kind of metal treatment on that to stop that from getting worse. But this is why these trunk floors always rusted, is they would get a little bit of moisture stuck in there and it would just fester. All right, here's your trunk latch. Now this is kind of different from what I'm used to seeing. A lot of times these bolts right here are painted, because when they painted the trunks on these cars, they had a fixture that was attached to the striker. And this looks like it's probably been monkeyed with. It's hard to say, maybe this is an NOS piece. But this would always be painted, the bolts would be painted, and then they would reuse these bolts here and they would be painted. Now the white zinc on this is correct, but I think someone's had that apart before, because that's not typical of what you see on an e-body. There's that original trunk mat with the part number. Screws holding that down. And let's go over and check out the other quarter panel. Now the owner did add these rags right here to kind of protect everything, keep it from rattling. There's that undercoating. So obviously they had like a piece of cardboard or something that they would put over that area, because you can see how that's squared off. But then it looks like the spray gun just ended right there. Clamps. One thing that's missed sometimes on restorations is these do not come on the restoration pieces, so you have to re-weld these hooks right here on e-bodies. More seam sealer. There's your trunk light wire. Let's look at this trunk seal and see if we can find a part number here. Oh, I'm not seeing a part number. Glue isn't really sloppy either. Sometimes you see yellow glue sprayed all over the place. All right, so we can do one more kind of a walk through the interior of the car here. Very nice and original. No mouse damage whatsoever. Everything is super original and clean. It's crazy how tight this headliner still is. Usually they start to come loose, start to sag or rip, but this car's been very well maintained over the years. A little sun damage on the top of the plastic panels there. Super clean. (1970) had the plastic insert down here. It was 1970 only for these retractors. So it was kind of a white plastic cup that goes around this. 1970 only. It's a 6-way power seat, or not power, 6-way adjustable seat. These things are awesome. Once again, here's a 1970 only for your seatbelt. 1970 only. 71 they put an ashtray in there, and 72, 3, 4 are all the same. Got the 4-screw hole wood grain on top there. Let's check out the inside here. That thing is super smooth. Look at the plating on that. It's just absolutely perfect still. So here's some NOS center cap covers, and I saved the original Tinnerman nuts off the rear drums. And this spring actually goes in the shifter. This thing needs replaced. The threads are stripped out on it, so that's one thing I have to do yet. Let's see how this closes. That closes really nice. They never close that nice. Also, still has the original lanyard holding that. You never see that. Nice. Really nice. It all matches. It's all original. Let's see what we got here. Some piece of paper. Wow. Look at that. Unused. Completely unused. Let's check out inside the trunk here, or the glove box. Alright, so here's one thing that really doesn't belong to the car. Is a different broadcast sheet. Now I'll take a look here. Alright, JS23N, so it's a 383 RT 70 Hamtramck car. In the same color though as this one. So we've got the same trim and the same paint code as this car with a white vinyl top. So this car right here looks like it would have looked just like this car, but it is not this car. This is a 440 RT, and this one, the N right there, is a 383. Interesting. Really nice condition. And also this is kind of that Organosol right here. It's really smooth but flat. No cracks or breaks right here. However, there is a crack right there. Holy cow. Wow. Well, put that away here. So wow, disappointed to see that this is cracked. But that AC vent cover underneath looks to be totally intact. The radio does work. I played with that yesterday. (1970) only, 71. The later models had exposed screws with a different, no plastic bezel to cover the screws. all my might to get that one. Oh man, no build sheet.
So someone might have been in here to pull it.
Well, there might not be one.
That too.
Alright, let me pull it over this way. Alright, pull that bezel off there first. Alright, we can peel the carpet forward a little bit. Maybe not. How about let's go backwards with it and leave that there. We can peel this backwards.
Not with the bucket.
Okay, nothing there. Alright, Draven, take a shot of this over here though. We got some stuff. Alright. So what do we got here? We got, this is for the wiper. Look at that perfect anodizing on there. And get a headliner clip.
Come over here and
We got some coins. Alright.
and you got wire nuts.
Let's see, nothing up there. We got a dime. Another penny.
Windshield chrome clip.
Windshield chrome clip. Alright. Well, that's
then
about it.
We got
Oh,
wire
we got
nut.
some that. And one of these.
Screw.
And another screw.
Interior screw
And then some Wrigley's bubblegum wrapper.
yeah, peppermint.
Alright, so that's what we got out of the inside of the car. No build sheet though. Alright. All right, so this section of the video is going to be devoted to the valance panels and a little bit of the underside. Now, it's commonly known that the valance panels were installed for painting and then removed as the car went down the assembly line to get the gas tank installed. Now, the gas tank straps, they go up inside there, and the valance panel was then removed and then bolted back on. So here is a typical fastener. It's a stud and a nut that attaches to the quarter panel. We'll go over and look at the other side here. So here's another stud and bolt, and this is 1970. So stud and bolt. Now I have found it on some cars where it's just an actual bolt, so no stud involved, but this particular one, it's a stud and a nut. All right, then we've got, I believe this is a 10 by 32 screw. So we've got a bracket back there with the screw. Now this screw I did have to install. That is just a hardware store screw that looks pretty good, but the original screws were gone. Here's the other one. Now the bracket is the original one. That's the thread size on that square nut inside there. Let's see, what is the other one? All right, so on the same bracket, now that's an original screw. On the same bracket, it's also a 10 by 32. And then over here, this is a capture nut, or I guess you'd call it spring nut. And then like a wood screw style or a really coarse thread style screw that goes into that. And that's on the corner. All right. So there's that attaching hardware, not the original style license plate screws. Here is the license plate. There's that screw. And then on 1970, they have a filler panel, and I'll let it down and show you that. Now the filler panel, it's right inside there. It basically takes up the gap between the bumper and the rear crossmember and taillight panel. Let's see if we can get a picture of a screw. Probably not. The panel is attached right back in here by Phillips screws that run the length of the, or the width of the car. And here's another picture of that right in there. Let's see if you can get any. Yeah, you can kind of see it right in there, that thin piece of tin. All right, so that should take care of the rear of the car. Let's go to the front. All right, so here's the front balance panel. You see your marker light, correct style screws. All right, let's get into the inside of it here. All right, so in here we've got bolts with spring nuts. We've got the bumper bracket, bumper bolts. Let's see if we can get to the inside of the balance panel here. There we go. So that's a bolt and a spring nut that's inside the frame rail. Then right here we've got the grille and the lower part of the valance attached to the hood latch support. And then here's the lower core support. Got one bolt there, and that's a spring nut. And the hood latch support has some welded square nuts on there. There's a condenser. Go to the other side here. And let's get up inside there. All right, so bolts with spring nuts. We'll conclude this valance panel thing by the license plate frame. So you pretty much tell this has never been removed. It's got wax and all kinds of garbage stuck in there. So you can get a close-up of that. There we go. That's your license plate bolt. Oh, check it out. And there's a nut on this side. So what's going on there? Let's see if we can get inside and take a look at what that's all about. Looks like just a nut and bolt situation. Just got flipped around. All right, so there's your front balance panel. All right, this part of the video will be about the front wheel undercoating and where it's covered and where it's not. So when I had the battery tray out, I applied some grease to these spring nuts and some of the bare metal so it didn't rust. Now, the undercoating was masked off so it did not cover the suspension area and it did not cover the bumper mount area. But as you can tell, it went clear up into the wheel arch, and they didn't cover it where the light was attached so they could get a good clean surface there for the light to mount. And not around the wheel arch so they didn't get it on the paint. There's an area here where it was masked off, so they didn't want to shoot undercoating inside the engine bay with that rubber cover off. There's where your P valve is attached. Masked off in this area. And then, like we've discussed before, fuel and brake systems were installed when the car was undercoated. So there's your e-brake cable. Torque box area. Spring nuts and studs. And not really any spacers in this one. We've seen a lot of them with big spacers inside there. Now, another detail item on this car is it did receive the lower blackout. So you can see remnants of the blackout there. rocker panel area had remnants of undercoating sprayed on it and the blackout. And I'm sure that area right there is just worn off, but it was fully intended to be blacked out. We'll go around the other side and check it out. So that's when you looked at the car from the side. It's kind of like the core support blackout. There was no reason to see paint under there. So this is the right side of the car. Need to get something on this rust so it doesn't attack the car anymore. So studs and spring nuts, blackout. Not much black on the bottom of the rocker on this, and no undercoating. So you could see on that driver's side how they really got the undercoating everywhere. There's your fuel line clamp. On the main supply line only, not on the return line. There's some return line clips. Just tie it together. Fuel line clip. Now this area where the spring purchase attached was masked off for the undercoating. So we've had these cars apart and we've seen a nice square area where there was zero undercoating applied. There's your fuel lines completely buried in undercoating and a clamp. The rear frame rails and fuel tank were often just blasted with undercoating. We'll just kind of finish out back here. So frame rails completely coated, rear splash areas completely covered. Now this gas tank had to be replaced, but you can see here on the original straps, undercoating completely covered it. And we do still have the original tank, and it's just completely covered. All right, so at this time, let's pull the car outside and get a closer look at what's going on with this paint. All right, so the history on the car, I do understand that the current owner's father purchased this car like 35 years ago, and obviously it's been inside like every day of its life, and the car has lived a pampered life. However, the odometer does show 54,000 miles and change. So from day one, this car has been babied. Now, it was sold brand new in Ames, Iowa, and from what I understand, it's never left the state. So this car is just never left Iowa, and it's always stayed in the central Iowa area. The paint has been buffed, and we are going to do a paint gauge thickness measurement on it here later in the video. But the hood has been repainted because at one point there was some damage done around the Dodge letters, and so the center of the hood had to be repainted. Totally original wheels and trim rings. The chrome has a little bit of pitting. It's not perfect by any means, but just shows super well. And we are going to buff on the paint a little bit, but really it just shows some dings and minor scratches throughout. No stripes, RT badging, and just super original. And the car just looks striking. The T6 dark brown poly has the original hood pin lanyards. You can see the RT blackout on the grille. When they did repaint the hood, it matched really well. One thing that's really cool about this car too, since it's been really well maintained, all the badges, the antenna, the glass has almost virtually no scratches on it, which if you've seen a lot of Mopars that have their original glass, it's always scratched. Like I said, the original tips are there. Chrome is starting to pit a little bit. There it still shows its Ames, Iowa dealer badge on it. Kind of a cloudy day, but the paint is just super reflective. Get some close-up shots of it here. Just a striking color, and the interior with the white vinyl top really looks great on this car. All right, one last thing, we're gonna measure the thickness of the paint.
Okay, so we're over here in the storage bay, and we're going to take a paint thickness reading with our paint gauge right here. And let's just start with the hood, where the only repaint on the car is. And right around in here is where the damage was done, and we know that it's been repainted, especially right here. So let's start with the reading right here. So we got 7.3 on the gauge, and we'll just do a couple spots throughout the hood here. So right there you can tell there's no extra primer. It's just basically another coat of paint. So right here, once again, there's definitely more primer and bodywork done right around these letters where it was damaged. So 2.5. So we'll go around and do a couple parts of the car where we know it hasn't been repainted. 3.1, a little bit thicker there. Let's go over to the driver's side here. Here's the driver's fender, and it doesn't look like any repairs have been done here, but let's see what we got. Whoa, that's actually kind of thick. I'm wondering why that. So let me zero this out just to make sure. All right, so let's go back and check that out. All right, there we go. So 3.5, that makes more sense. So we'll go on the side of the fender, and that's 2.03. I'll go down the side here. And you can imagine, so these cars were painted by hand. It's just two guys on an assembly line, and they're just trying to pump these cars out as fast as possible. So you can imagine if you're up here spraying, you're spraying and spraying and spraying, and then down here, maybe you don't care how much paint you get on it. So a lot of times we'll notice like the top parts of the car have a lot more paint than the bottom. So let's just kind of go through the areas here. So 2.12, and down here on the bottom, well, he got a lot of paint there, so that's 3.2. And we'll just work our way down the car here. So top of the door, 2.87, middle of the door, 2.25, bottom of the door, 2.13. And then you can also imagine too, like over the years, since this car's been really well maintained, how many times has it been waxed, buffed? How much has it sat in the sun? How much, like, let's measure right here where your arm might be. Like, let's say you're driving the car and right here the paint might wear thin. So let's see what that guy reads. So see, there we go, 1.7. So that would indicate maybe someone's rested their arm there a whole bunch and it's just worn through. Side of the door, 2.27, and the bottom of the door. Oops, we better zero that out and make sure we got a good reading. All right, so we'll go again, 3.2. Dutchman panel and the trunk. All right, so 3.47, 2.3. Well, that's really interesting because you'd think like when the guy is spraying it, that they're spraying it consistently. It's really hard to say though. So let's try another spot on the trunk. 2.8. Go to the edge here. 2. 2.7. Real interesting on the difference of the thickness. We'll do a little bit on the quarter panel and then we'll be done with that. 4.7. So possibly when they sprayed it, he had a little bit of extra paint there. So zero it out and check it one more time. 2.43, 2.9, 3.12. So that's why I think it's real important to reset it back to zero. You can see the inconsistencies. All right, so we also have another original paint car. This is a Los Angeles built 69 Dart. And you can definitely see the disparity between a nice, well-maintained, kept inside kind of a paint job and then a car that spent its life outside in the California sun. And you can tell by the way that it is, this car had been worked on a lot. Both fenders are really worn through. And so let's just take a paint reading here. So 0.9, like really thin. There's the hood, 4. So you can tell this has been like leaned on
a lot, you know, someone leaning over the fender and working on it. And then the hood, and you can just tell by the way that it looks, is the hood's been up a ton. And then we'll just do one more on the side and show you that. So two. So anyway, this is a real handy tool. We don't have to use it on every car, but it's really nice to get an idea of what paint looks like and how thick it is.
All right, so thanks for sticking around to the end to watch the paint measuring device. This is a mil gauge, and this is super handy when it comes to just checking out paint thickness. And it will tell you if there's been any body work done on the car. And I like to take these to car shows or auctions. And obviously with the car show, you better get someone's permission before you start touching their car with it. And I could see some owners just declining that you not use it on their car. But if you go to like a Barrett Jackson or a Mecum auction and you have a bidder's pass, you are allowed to touch the cars and you can measure the paint. So if you wanted to see like how thick the bodywork is, or if it's a claim to be an original car, this is a real handy device. Anyway, this concludes the whole deal on this 70 Challenger Survivor. Now we do have some other cars in my customer base that are Survivors, and I hope to be doing some more documentation on those. We have a customer, Bill, he's got an AAR. We got a customer, Craig, who has a Duster that he bought brand new, and I don't know, we'll come up with some more Survivors. If you like this kind of content where we document Survivors, please comment. Let me know what you like or don't like, and if there's any other kind of videos you like to watch, we've got some other videos coming up. We're in the paint shop. We've got some how-to videos and just all kinds of stuff. So please comment, please subscribe, and you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook under Mopar Keith or Mopars and Muscle. So thanks again for watching. Take care.